Move about the country.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Your. It stands for Year of Magical Learning. And today we're up to book 53. The book is Nudge. Why don't you tell us about Nudge, Chris?
Nudge, I know you've read this one, so you tell us about the book.
Well, a Nudge is it's a book written by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. It's about improving decisions by nudging people. Like in a book, they're talking about there's certain things that you can do to set people in the right direction by giving them a little hint or giving them a default choice. For example, in insurance, when you say, if you from year to year, if you go and you don't pick anything, by default it'll pick for you. Like, hey, you pick on this default plan or whatever it is. So basically it's nudging you to be covered in that sense. And when so it's talking about how people can use certain, I guess, matrix to give you decision like, hey, how do I make you invest in 401k, for example, is to
Right.
kind of like by default, if you don't opt out, you are opt in for this percentage or whatever. Similar to a lot of social media where they talk about by default, you are allowing people to see your email, see your profile, bio,
Share your
whatever,
data.
until you
Yeah.
opt out. You have to opt out of the privacy. So these are kind of like nudging in a way, because you create a decision tree to give people something that, hey, if they don't have the inclinations or forget about it, they are into that category. And so to me, that's what I get from the book. That's in my own word, what that book is about. And it's about having informations to architect choices for people. They call these people choice architecture.
Right.
And a lot of businesses, they use this information to, like I just mentioned, Facebook, for example, would actually give you a choice to opt out, but by default, you allow them to collect your information until you opt out of it, or privacy and this and that. So they are using these kind of nudge concept for their own benefit. And so in a nutshell, that's what the book is about from my perspective. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I mean, the only thing I would add to that would be it's about deep understanding of humanity and why we do what we do, just by
yes, I agree.
And then from there, leveraging that to
you
create that choice
leveraging
architecture.
people's
Right.
psychologies and default
Right.
behavior. And so, like I said, people tend to forget. And so you kind of going to say, well, how can I create a choice for them to leverage that weakness or strength, whatever you want to call it, right? And make that as a benefit to me or a benefit to them, depending on how I want to choose to place it, right? Whether that, hey, you want to invest in some kind of 401k, and these are the indexes or whatever, that if you don't choose, it's going to be default. This is the index, and this is the best index or the most safe index or whatever the case may be. So with the choice architects, they are able to use it for good or for bad based on their intent, but at the same time, it's leveraging, or in a way you could say exploiting the human psychology of common behavior, whatever you want to determine
biases,
that.
Heuristics. Literally, it builds on, if you took Thinking Fast and Slow and then you took all the cognitive biases and heuristics and things like that people just naturally experience, and it's decided to craft like your own little maze out of it. I think that's like nudge, thoughts. But so that leads, it's good description of the book. Before I get to the reflection, would you recommend this book or not? Like, I mean, I'm curious.
I think I would. It's a pretty good book, because it's a double-edged sword, because you have to look from a perspective of, this is your power, right? Because if I give somebody a sword, right, I could hurt myself or I could defend myself. Right. I give somebody a gun, the same thing, right? It's about a tool that you use. If you don't use it, right, other people are going to use on you. So do you pretend that you don't know and let people, kind of nudge you in the direction that you may not want? Is that, I mean, to me,
you're killing my reflection, because this is what I did. This is exactly the thought that I had when I read
so
this.
I would recommend the explanation. Let you take on with the reflection.
Yeah, your great minds think alike, though. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm actually a little torn on whether or not I would recommend this book. I enjoyed it, but I learned from it. But I don't know that I don't know. I'm like 50-50 on this one.
Let's ask this question to you after we gone through our discussions and see if you change your mind.
Fair enough. So actually, similar along the lines of what you were talking about, the reflection title is with knowledge comes power. So choose wisely how you apply that in the world, right? So, I mean, honestly, we've already talked a lot about this reflection already, which I probably should have just let the conversation go. But my thought was, after reading this book and reading all the books that we've been reading, the more that I learn on this journey about, how our brain works, how our bodies work, how our minds work, how my mind works, how the things that the blind spots that I have, that what you see is all there is kind of, aspects of this life, the influence from Robert Cialdini kind of stuff, the psychology of the thousands and thousands and thousands of years of what's gone into making us who we are today, the more I become more fascinated. Sometimes I want to go back in time and say, like, sometimes really ignorance is bliss, like when you don't know some things, sometimes it could be better sometimes, like when you haven't learned that first little nugget of knowledge or whatever, people can become pretty dangerous with stuff like this, like we talked about, like the Black Swan book, if that's the only book you read you read one book a year and that's the one you pick up, that's not a good idea. That's when you become crazy.
It's turned upside down.
Exactly.
A reference to correct it.
Exactly. My honest to God advice would be is either you go all in on your knowledge quest in your life, and you remember and anchor yourself on the fact that you don't know shit, but you don't know anything. Just to always remind yourself, like, the more that you do feel like like you really don't know anything.
Okay.
So that's like the anchor that kind of holds me to everything. But at the end of the day, if I had my choice between just a little bit of knowledge and no knowledge, I probably would pick no knowledge, to be honest with you, because it could be. Look, I don't care. Manipulate me. Like, I don't really care. Like, I mean, as long as I'm happy. That said, nudge is one of those, like, really interesting concepts of how to build on that knowledge and how to apply that into the world. Nudging, for me in particular, one of the reasons why I don't know that I love this book is, who am I to choice architect somebody else's life? I struggle with this one of if we self-proclaim that we don't know shit, like we always do, because I think we both believe that at our core. Even if I think that I know what I'm doing and I put you in a maze of my design, and while I don't make the decision for you, I certainly have a bias and a lean toward what I feel like is good, right? Versus bad. And then who's defining good versus bad? So I struggle a lot with this concept, especially for the whole idea of libertarian paternalism that he talks about in the book, right? I think of, like, my own dad, right?
Yes.
And I wrote about this in the reflection. I love my dad. Like, he's amazing. He's a great guy. Like, I think he's, I mean, there's a lot of amazing things about him, but I also know that he does not know best. Like, like if my dad was choice architecting my life as a kid, I would be like, oh my God, I'm like, I'm screwed, not that he's a bad person, but like, my dad doesn't know anything and we don't know anything, so to think that father knows best, like, which is literally libertarian paternalism. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to choice architect my children's life, like, I'm not going to nudge them. I don't want to nudge them. I want to help them to discover what's important for them and to grow and to learn and to develop their own understanding of their life around them and to use that however they want to apply that. But, for me, I think nudging something that I don't know how I totally feel about, this is why I don't know that I would highly recommend this book. So at the end of the day, though, learning is a blast. It's a ton of fun and I never want to stop it. I never want it to be not a part of my life, but with that knowledge comes a lot of power, like in how you apply this in the world. I just wanted to make a note on this one of, like, keep learning. Everybody should learn, but at the end of the day, really think hard about how you apply that knowledge into this world. If nudging is what you want to do, then I guess go ahead and do that. But yeah, I mean, you can really turn this into some wicked stuff if you really want to. And that's when it becomes a little dicey for me. So that's my reflection. And the question would be is, how are you applying your knowledge in your world? But yeah, love to get your thoughts. Like, do you agree with this concept or not?
I find it interesting that you said that ignorance is bliss and that you either go all in the knowledge or you stay out of it, right?
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. Because for me, the way I see it is that knowledge and ignorance is like the two parts of a dumbbell.
Right. Yeah. It's the polarity, right?
And so you can't have just a little knowledge.
Right.
You either have all the knowledge,
which is impossible.
The majority of them anyway, right? On the ignorance side. Because to me, when you learn of something, you feel sad, you feel depressed. Because knowledge is that, right? What I've learned throughout my learning journey is that you cannot go to wisdom unless you cross knowledge.
I agree with that. I think we both agree that knowledge and the quest of knowledge and learning is important.
Stay in knowledge,
right.
You stay in knowledge, it's a painful experience. It's mentally painful because you know all kind of shit that you shouldn't be knowing. Right? I mean, think about reading The Black Swan, thinking about reading Nudge, right? And so that in that essence, it's just like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
You basically in that knowledge hell. Right. Like, until you're able to find some kind of insights or patterns into the knowledge and apply it. Wisdom is when you able to like learn something from the knowledge itself, right? And so that is the child. Wisdom is a child of knowledge. But until you get to wisdom is where you want to find the happiness, right? When you in knowledge, it doesn't. And so that's the thing is, ignorance is bliss, but at the same time, you will never be, you be the opposite of, you cannot get to wisdom because you have to
cross funny.
it.
Is ignorance maybe bliss, but like learning is fulfillment, and like, I don't necessarily like happiness isn't the end all be all, like, right. Like it's, sometimes
it's
like,
not fulfillment is what you're looking for. Happiness is a side effect of fulfillment.
Exactly. That's I guess I was saying if ignorance in its purest form is just pure happiness, where you're so stupid that you don't even know like whether or not you should be sad or not, you know what I mean, or unhappy or in pain or not.
But ignorance tends to put you in a position where you are not able to have a lot of flexibility and options. And
you're vulnerable.
You're vulnerable for people to take advantage of you, for people to make your life harder. Even though you're ignorant about that particular subject or whatever that is, you don't know, hey, the world is evil, right? You don't know that, and that's fine. But because you don't know that doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle to do business or raise family or kids picking on your kids. And so you still have to deal with the heartaches of the other things because of ignorance. Yes, you are safe from knowing that the world is corrupt or whatever the case, or the world is harsh or whatever, right? The wilderness is harsh or the weather is harsh. You can't live in a world like that. But at the same time, because you are ignorant, you're not prepared. And therefore, when you start a business, people will take advantage of you. You can't even rise just for a little bit to breathe. You're treading water all the time. So it comes with its own downfall.
100%. I mean, there is no such thing as pure ignorance. I mean, life is learning. Like, no matter, even if you actively tried to never learn ever in your life, you're going to learn something,
Yes.
like you're going to learn.
Yes. You're going to learn something because you learn something, hey, some idiot, boys, trying to impress somebody, pick up, kind of picked on your daughter and make fun of her and shame her for whatever, just to look good among his friends. You learned that.
Right.
And knowledge depresses you.
Right. Like you cannot go through life not learn. It's impossible.
So knowledge is something that you're gonna learn. So when we learn, we choose the knowledge we want to learn.
You can control it. I think that was where I was gonna go with this. Is like, you can't avoid learning in this world. You can choose
because things gonna come by you and knock on your door and they say, hey, this is what happened to you today.
Right.
You can learn it one way or another.
And that's when, some of the biggest lessons in life come from the most painful things, right? Because you learn that, because that's when it forces you to reflect and learn and to dig deep, because you have to, right? But like, one of the things that you and I have talked about ad nauseum over this whole journey is we don't want people to have to go through what we went through in order to make learning a part of their life, in order to understand who they are, how they want to live their life, and what's important to them. We don't want people to have to experience the lows of, to put their values center stage and to go figure out these things in their life, what's important to them. Let's help them to do it now and to get them an ecosystem and an environment to find that path forward. So like that's how we're applying our knowledge. I'm okay. So like, my general rule of thumb, and I think you would probably agree with this, would be, I say apply your knowledge toward your purpose and toward your infinite game, toward the things that you care about. Like, and I don't mind if you're choice architecting that stuff, you care. Like, I know that you care. And I know that if that's important to you, even if you unknowingly lead people down the wrong path. You did it with good intentions, and you did it because you really truly cared, and this was what you were dedicated to. So
Yes.
I'm totally cool with people nudging in that regard. But if you're just nudging people just to mess around, with people, like, and to play games, like, I'm not cool with that. And that's the stuff that gets, where I'm on the edge of this book. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next point, is that I think we need to know how to nudge for our own purposes, because we can decide what to do with the knowledge, right? You can use it for bad or you use it for good, right? Because if I can choice architect my life in a way that's going to make my life better, so can I help me, give me a leg up in my life, because I have this heuristic, his kind of million of years of conditioning to do this, right? And if that's the case, we need to know both our strengths and weaknesses so that we can prepare for it. And I think that's the why I would recommend this book, because you're gonna need to know whether you can choice architect your own choices in your life,
that's a
and
good point.
also be able to defend against people going to architect for their own benefit that is not for your benefit, that's bad for you, it's harmful for you. Because if you don't know that, you're going to go along because that makes sense, or whatever the case may be. So you gotta be able to protect yourself. So that's why I do believe this book is warranted, and recommendations. And I may add one other thing to it. The reason why I recommend this book and I like this book, because when they talk about libertarian paternalism, I don't emphasize on that. And I think because I ignore that concept, because if we talk about that concept alone, then I would hate it. But I think because you have more emphasis on that particular concept, where he is saying, hey, we know best, so we're going to tell you what to do. So that to me is a separate, I think the book is great.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think you actually sold me on saying that I would recommend this book, only because I think you hit on a really important part of what we're trying to do here and what we're trying to build for our own selves is we nudge our own life and we create our own choice architecture around our values. It's important to, like, this is a standing meeting for us every single night. It's on the calendar, right? We have the ability to say no, but we've already told ourselves that we're going to do it, right?
It's not default and hey, I want to opt into learning. No. Right?
Exactly.
Right. You have to opt out. You cannot. That's a good use of choice architecture. And knowing how to use it. I mean, every day we are learning about different books and different concepts, and knowing your heuristic and my heuristic, our own default psychology, our own weaknesses, because of our conditioning for millions of years. We understand a lot of things we haven't even on our mind. Like we never cross our minds if we haven't done all these things. But because we choose to meet every day at the same time and talk about something new, something that we say, well, this is what I believe in, it actually reaffirm what we believe in, reaffirm what we learn, and also expand, because you and I are able to add to each other's.
Agreed. Here's my summation of this. And man, this is why these conversations are fun. It's nudge by example. Nudge your own life first. Create the choice architecture and that makes you lead by example. And then you end up creating meaningful work projects like we're doing right now, which then we're kind of nudging other people. I mean, we're broadcasting these things. We're putting it on YouTube. We're putting it on Clubhouse. We're putting it on, the blog. I'm sharing it on social media, stuff like that. We're nudging people. And that is our plan, is to, if people curious wanted to go through this whole entire process with us, to do their own Your Magical Learning journey, to join the clubbity mission of living their values and expressing their values individualistically, but also as a collective, where we can all gain together. So I say it's nudge yourself and lead by example first. And in turn, I think you will naturally start to nudge other people toward what you're trying to do. And that aligns to that's alignment, with purpose, with yourself, with your meaning, with meaningful work, with meaningful relationships building around that. Like that I'm into, like, at a macro level, at like the government level of libertarian paternalism, nudging an entire population just because you think that's the right thing to do. Like, I don't know if I'm cool with that. Like,
the thing is, I think I'm looking from the perspective of not using nudge as a government agency or as the big tech companies or as any of those guys. I'm looking from my perspective as a user, because like, for one, the first thing you said was to kind of nudge your own, to make yourself better. But at the same time, the second thing you can do is you can identify what other people have been used to nudge you, and then you can identify that and decide whether or not that's good for you. And so you can opt out of it and defend yourself, because if you don't defend yourself, well, that's a big problem.
I agree.
Because
I'm being
because
nudged. I get
this
nudged all day
company,
long in Salesforce.
yeah, because they act on the father knows best concept, and they tell you, hey, we should know all of your activities, and whether privacy or not. And so we need to track all your activities so we can tell you what you need, tell you what you don't need, tell you how to vote, tell you how to what to say, what not to say, what's PC, what not PC, right? And to me, they are gonna do that to you anyway.
Yeah, if you're not choice
you're gonna
architecting your
have
own
to
life, somebody else is gonna be
to realize it and defend yourself. Well, you don't know, and you can defend yourself. And so for me, it's to me, with our discussion, I think I really recommend this book. But I would really, really, really recommend, if you have the ability, read Think Fast and Slow first, and then read this book.
Yeah, that's true. They do touch on it a little bit at the beginning of it, but I think that the basis.
But the thing is, it's talking about heuristic. It's talking about how you become that way and what your brains are doing. And Thinking Fast and Slow, I think that book is good by itself without having to turn your life upside down. And then having that point of reference will give Nudge a more understandable spin.
Yeah.
And then that's fair. Try not to pretend that you're going to be the guy who's going to enact the concept of libertarian paternalism, right?
Like I said, with a little bit of knowledge comes, like, there's nothing I say the worst thing in the world about learning something new. You become this evangelist. I mean, we saw this with some of our explorers when they were discovering their own value and getting kind of preachy about it. You haven't fully resonated in your own mind yet of what this actually means, and you get this little bit of knowledge, you want to go tell everybody, right? And like, so I think my final point is, once you get a little taste of this stuff, that's great. Keep going. Just dive all the way into the learning, journey, and join what we're doing. Hell, we'll be here to support you to do that. We're trying to put together a program where people can do their own magical learning, and then eventually, as this stuff all starts to absorb, and you'll start to understand, like it'll become clear what you want to do with this knowledge, and how you want to apply it to your life, and how you want to live your values off of it. That would be my recommendation. Like, don't just do a little bit, just go in, like make it a part of your life. Yeah.
Right. So in the end, what would you say you're going to recommend? Is it that's a recommend? And that's a no?
I'll recommend it. You convinced me to, if I pivot this to apply to my own personal life and my own choice architecture of myself, because that's the only thing I can control. I'm into that. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I think one of the things I would recommend to Professor Thaler and the author is, if you can maybe move or tone down the libertarian paternalism a little bit more, I would like the book a little bit more. Because I think that for whatever reason, they insert that into the book and make that book a little bit more icky.
Yeah. I couldn't. I was thinking of it the entire time as like a manipulative thing at a macro level, and I don't know that that's their intention. I think it's just understanding yourself and understanding how to create choice architecture to lead you to the choices you feel is right, and if you're following your values, that will always lead you in the right direction. So choice architecture life around that. And I think that you could rewrite this entire book around choice architecture of values guiding your way. And if that's the path, that is what we're preaching. Like, it's the same thing, Anyway, awesome, guys. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think we got them all. So
awesome. That was a good conversation. So the question for anybody listening in, or something you want to reflect on yourself, is how are you applying your knowledge in this world? Something to really think deeply about and to figure out what really matters to you and how you are sharing that with the world. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next episode.
Yeah, sounds good.